Hello and welcome to NavTalk. NavTalk is proudly brought to you by the Navwealth Financial Group, helping you reach your destination in life on purpose. My name is Simon Prowse and I'll be your regular host for this series of podcasts. And I look forward to bringing you interviews and content on a broad range of topics. Topics that will be educational, inspirational, informative and at times fun. Welcome to NavTalk. I have the great pleasure today to be interviewing a very smart and mature young lady called Claudia. Hi there, Claudia.
Hi, how are you going?
I'm great. I'm also here today with Sally. Sally's the Director of Navwealth Finance. Hi there, Sally.
Hi there, Simon.
And Claudia, I hope you don't mind, you're going to have two barrels coming at you with this discussion, but Sally and I would love to talk to you about your property journey and all the things you've learnt along the way, because I think it's quite significant.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the smarts around the property, give us a little bit of your background and your journey, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, grew up in the Northern Beaches, born and bred in Mona Vale. So I think growing up, parents got divorced when we were younger. We grew up renting, moving around a lot, and I think that's where it originally started from, being interested in property, just not really wanting to rent forever in my life, wanting some stability in my life, and wanting to rely on no one but myself. So looking around the Northern Beaches, some of your parents' friends have nice homes, and it's just something that you want to grow up having. And I think from there it just naturally progressed.
So when you were growing up, you did move around a bit due to that?
We did. We moved around. I reckon I lived in over 10 properties before I was, 15.
Wow.
So a lot of moving and, just getting used to the new norms week on, week off at your parents' house. It can be challenging and disruptive when you're growing up. And I just realised that, I didn't want that when I'm older, and I wanted to set myself up for the future.
Claudia, that's fascinating. And tell us a little about your education background that sort of brought you along this journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in high school, I was obsessed with all things business. I started business studies. I loved everything about it. I knew in year 11 that I wanted to do a business degree straight away. So as soon as I finished high school, I went straight into my business degree, knocked that out in 3 years. And within my 3 years, I had to do work placement, which I organised in commercial real estate in Neutral Bay. And that was the first time they put me on a salary. So I was pretty excited to see that paycheck come in weekly. And that's when the saving of my first deposit really started.
Was that probably where you got a bit more exposure to the property side of things because you're working within the business?
Absolutely. I saw all aspects of real estate, which was really interesting. I worked in a small team of 5, so I got to do property management, sales, leasing. I understood how it all worked, and I found it incredibly fascinating. And I found myself just wanting to know more and more each week. Oh,
great. And you said you did that as an outplacement service with the uni, but then you're on a salary. So did they sort of say, oh, we love you so much, come and work with us, did they?
So usually with uni, they will assign you a work placement. However, I knew it was going to be for 9 months and I thought I may as well utilise this time and organise my own placements at a place where, I was going to be interested in learning more, which was commercial real estate. So I applied for a few jobs. I got an interview and they ended up hiring me full-time, working at all aspects of the industry, whether it was property management, administration assistant, sales, leasing. And that's when I really fell in love with real estate.
And that was around the commercial side still?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was business to business, which was, again, really interesting. Understanding how leases worked, understanding how, you'd do a make good of a property, and really just having some clients on the books, seeing, the earning potential by having these investment properties. It was pretty outstanding, to be honest with you.
So you'd already fallen in love with property, but just this sort of exposure, I suppose, sealed the deal in terms of, wow, this is the journey I want to really get into.
Absolutely. Yeah, just watching everyone be a part of the industry and all the things that go on behind the scenes, it was pretty amazing.
So you're about 45 and you start thinking about buying that property? Is that how it works?
No, it doesn't. So I think I was 19 and I started saving. I probably put 70% of my paycheck away each week. I knew that everyone else that was 19 was not earning, they weren't on a salary job. And I knew that if there's any time to save for a deposit, it's now while I was living at home. So I saved. I didn't go on holidays. I knew it was only a short-term thing. 2 years sounds like a long-term thing when you're 19, but I knew what my long-term goals were, and it was always saving for a deposit. I opened up my first bank account and I renamed the bank account Home Deposit. So I knew every single time I was transferring into it why I was doing it, and it was just a reminder every single week what I was saving towards. And as it just kept going up and up, a year goes by and you're at $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and you just get so motivated. And it just really gets easy once you start saving and you start seeing it grow over time, the compounding effect. It's amazing.
You're pretty unique in that world. At 19, you set the goal to buy the property, which is really unusual for a 19-year-old, and then you had the discipline to open a bank account and start saving. Did you do that with an end goal? Do you have any idea of how much you needed to save? How did you go about that process?
I probably didn't have an end goal. I just knew I needed to start and just keep saving. I probably wanted to save more than $50,000. I know the prices around the Northern Beaches and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But I knew being a first home buyer, I had to live in it for 6 months. So I was thinking, where do I have to be in terms of buying on the Northern Beaches financially? So I knew it was going to be, anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000.
Okay, I just wanted to jump in here because one of the things that I strongly believe is when you are going on this property journey, it is a long-term goal. So I think it's amazing. And your mindset. So I just was wanting to delve a little bit more into how did that goal and mindset come about? Did you educate yourself or?
Definitely. I listened to all the podcasts under the sun about property, finance, savings plans. I also read a lot of books. And from there, I just picked what I thought was relevant to me and what was going to help me. And in the end, I decided to open up this bank account. And when I started earning, good money, I transferred it over to my mum. And I said, Mum, if I ask for $1 out of this bank account, I better have a good reason. And so once I reached about $40,000, I transferred it to my mum. And that's where I saved the rest. And I think for me, once I hit that amount of money, it was out of sight, out of mind. On a Saturday night, when I started going out when I was young, there was no temptation because I didn't see it. And if I didn't see it, then it wasn't mine. So that was another big tip that really helped me, was transferring that big chunk of money over to my parents.
So we've got the mindset that we want to buy the property. We've started the savings journey. You're educating yourself about all the ways to save and all the things to look for in property. When do you actually physically start kicking doors or actually walking through the doors of property and really expose yourself to it?
So before I had enough money, I would go to open houses anyway on a Saturday. It's the only way you can understand what's going on in the market, and it's the only way you can understand what you're going to get for your money. So I would go through the properties. I might rock up at an auction and have a look. I will follow the property. I'll see if it's sold within the guide, over the guide, under the guide, and I'll start going, okay, well, maybe if I bought a renovator, it's going to sell under the guide and then I can add value. But you don't know this until you go out there and see it for yourself. The market's always changing, so you need to be on top of that. And the only way you can be on top of it is doing all the legwork yourself and going out there and physically viewing them.
How many properties in that period do you think you looked at?
Probably hundreds, definitely hundreds. Yeah, absolutely. And most of them were over budget because that's just the nature of where I was looking. However, it was really interesting to understand where I'm probably going to be able to buy something, what condition it's going to be in. And the only way I knew that was from going through all those properties.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and at what point did you need to understand what you were looking for? Like, what was your budget? Did you had a mortgage broker, I understand, and did they help you decide what you could actually be looking for, or how did that all work?
So in terms of what I was looking for, that came from listening to podcasts and reading books. So what I took out of the podcast was three main things. One was location. You can never change location, but you can change the property. So the location was a big one for me. Number two was the building, preferably 60s or 70s brick buildings. They've stood the test of time. They're not going to have any major defects. And if they're going to have defects, you're going to know about them because, they're going to be there in the strata reports. And number three was the size of the block. I was looking for anything under 20 apartments in the block. Less is always better because when people are buying property, you want to look for scarcity. So you want to look for, well, why is my property better than yours? And if you're buying in a high-rise apartment, you're competing with 200 other apartments that are like for like. So I was trying to find scarcity, location, and an older style block.
Wow, there's some real nuggets there of gold, I think.
Yeah, you're right, Sally. There's some absolute nuggets there. Claudia, in terms of those three facets, how do you say you learnt that? Was it from your working in the business or was it from the podcasts and the kicking the tyres, so to speak?
A little bit of both. Physical experience by going through properties. Sometimes I'd go through modern complexes and I'd have a look through the strata report and there was always defects. There was developers trying to fix up defects throughout the whole block, and it would become a common theme that all of these new buildings had problems. Not always, but most of them. And when I would look through the strata reports of older style buildings, I knew that, yeah, there may be some waterproofing issues there and here. However, it was all there, clear as day. And I knew that, if these properties have been here since, the 60s and 70s, there's really nothing that isn't wrong with it that I can't see right in front of me. The other thing was obviously working in real estate. You do view a lot of properties and you get an understanding of, the ones that have less problems. Some of the blocks, the older blocks, do have things like concrete cancer and things like that. However, it's just being diligent, reading through the strata report and understanding what problems. Every building's going to have a problem. It's just by understanding what problems you're willing to take on.
You brought up a really interesting point there, and I want to clarify for the younger listeners that may not understand it, but a strata report, what's that?
So a strata report is basically something you have available to download, and it will encompass all of the annual general meeting minutes that you have. So basically everyone gets together, all the owners, once a year, and they talk about everything in the building, if there's any problems. Maybe there's been some waterproofing problems. Now there'll be quotes and all of that will be in the strata report. It will also tell you how many owner occupiers are in the building. It will tell you if there's any concrete cancer in the building. It will tell you if they've had to have builders out to inspect, if there's any issues. It will tell you if you're allowed pets in the building. It will have all the bylaws. These are all incredibly important things that you need to look at. You can also get your solicitor to help you look over it or your buyer's agent to help you look over it if you're unsure of what you need to be looking for in a strata report.
So the strata report, if you like, is the resume of the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the strata report, if you like, is on a unit. What are we looking for if we're buying a house instead of a unit?
If you're buying a house, I would definitely recommend getting an independent building and pest inspector. It's also worth looking on council websites, checking the zoning, make sure you don't have any nearby developments happening, and also just making sure you're not in any flood zones or fire zones. Otherwise, the insurance can be costly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. So we're 19, we've started to kick tyres, we're educating ourselves, the savings are starting to happen. At what point do you go, I'm ready to really buy?
So I went to a couple of mortgage brokers that couldn't help me. So the first hurdle was actually getting the loan. Being a first home buyer on a single income, it was challenging. I finally got a loan with my broker from the third broker I went to, and that was when I realised now's go time. It was coincidentally also the time that COVID hit and the world was ending apparently. However, for me, it was a massive opportunity. And I realised that if there's any time to buy on the Northern Beaches where I was looking, now is the time.
So we've gone, now is the time. Tell us how that journey took you.
Can I also just step in here? Yeah, that's excellent. Can I just ask you, at that point, did you actually have a loan pre-approved before you went out looking?
I was already looking. However, I was just casually looking, seeing what's out there, seeing what things were selling for. During that process, I was always trying to get my pre-approval done. I was trying to get my pre-approval done the day I was eligible. And then, yes, once I had my pre-approval done, then it was go time.
Couple of questions in there. You said the day you were eligible. What do you define that?
The day I got my formal approval letter from my mortgage broker to say that, yes, I have been approved for my loan for X amount of money, then I knew it was go time.
Fantastic. So we're ready to go. You got the loan. By this time, how much have you sort of managed to sock away with Mum?
I'd saved about $70,000. And I did go through the 5% home loan deposit scheme. However, I had saved 10%, which was great.
And how old were you at this time, Claudia?
I was about 22 years old.
That's amazing. So in 3 years, you've cobbled together $70,000.
That's correct.
Obviously, you weren't being charged enough board at the time.
Obviously not.
I just want to also get some tips on how you mentioned that you gave your money to your mother.
Yeah.
Was there a specific bank account, or you said that you listened to podcasts about how to save? Was there anything in particular to actually help you get to that point?
Absolutely. I set up an ING account after reading The Barefoot Investor, which I think half the world read.
Yeah.
But at the time, it actually, because I had so much money in there, I was getting really good interest on it. So it definitely helped. I also set up they have I can't remember what it's called, where all of your excess change goes into your savings by default.
Yes.
What's that called?
They've got a specific product for savings.
So whenever I spent like $1.50, the 50 cents would always go into my savings.
Yeah, ING is very good.
So the roundups would always go into...
So they round each time you spent money up and put that excess into that savings.
Correct. I can't remember what it's called though.
I have actually set our children up on ING for that reason.
They're going awesome.
The only negative I can say about ING, unfortunately, they teach the bucket system very well about savings, and which I then do in my job for mortgages. But unfortunately, ING don't have that product, so they actually normally have to go to a different bank to set that up with all the different offsets. But it's a very good podcast to listen to get into that habit.
Definitely, yeah, because I actually didn't go with ING for my loans, but they were just good to save with.
Okay, so you've got the savings happening with ING. You're starting to get up in your 70. The world's gone to poo with COVID. It's probably the only way to describe it at the time. But you've seen that as a golden opportunity, and you've taken the big bold step of going out and really saying, I'm going to buy.
Absolutely. So I called every single real estate agent under the sun on a daily basis with a follow-up email with my brief, telling them exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, 60s or 70s brick, under 20 in the block, anywhere on the northern beaches, and here's my price bracket. And I just reinforced that with every agent. Fortunately, because of COVID, there weren't too many people looking, and there were a few fire sales. And I reckon about 6 weeks into hassling agents, I got a phone call for an off-market property in Freshwater. They took me through, and by that afternoon I had made an offer and we were negotiating, and I successfully purchased that property well under market value, which was amazing.
So it's amazing bits of gold there, right? You've already told us you had your 3 criteria: location, the building and the block. You've then turned around and stuck that criteria into a brief to every agent, so the agent knows about you, rather than just turning up and kicking the tyres yourself. And from that strategy, you're able to get something off market.
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct.
And that off market buy, because it was off market, no one else, of course, saw it. But did you think that created even a bigger opportunity? Do you think you got a better deal because that was off market?
Definitely. Absolutely. I was the only person that had probably seen the property, which meant there was no competition. And because I was able to move swiftly and the owner was very motivated to sell. It was the perfect opportunity to get a deal done.
And so the last bit in that, you mentioned that it was off market. Why do you think people were doing stuff off market? Was there any reason?
I think there's a couple of reasons why people sell off market. One, they don't have to pay any marketing fees. It can cost up to $10,000 to put your property on realestate.com, style it. Two, when sometimes you have difficult tenants that don't want to give you access. Three, they don't want the neighbours finding out that you're selling their property. There's a lot of nosy neighbours out there and they're not interested in having their neighbours walk through their property. Four, they're very private and they just don't want their property being on realestate.com for everyone to see. So there was a few reasons there. But I think the main driver for this particular property was paying zero marketing fees.
Right. That makes a lot of sense now. So we've got a really scared time and you saw an opportunity. Are we seeing, I mean, you're now playing in this game and we'll get into that a bit more, but are you seeing those times start to repeat themselves? Are you feeling that time at the moment?
Definitely. There is negative media out there. Everything you read is negative about property, and it was very much the same conversation when COVID hit. And I think it's really hard to not get caught up in the media. Everywhere you go, people are talking about property. But my biggest advice to people that are trying to buy right now would be just focus on yourself. Focus on what your game plan is. Don't worry about the media. If you're going to be holding this property for 10 plus years, what does it matter what's happening in today's market?
Yeah, that's a good point. And for those who are worried about these interest rates going up and so forth, how would you dispel that or put that one to bed?
Absolutely. I think planning for the future, understanding that, yes, this is the new norm. We are having interest rate rises. Sitting down with maybe your broker or a professional and working out, well, what does that look like financially for me? If we did have 3 more rate rises next year, can I afford to do my repayments? Do I have enough savings if I needed to cover my mortgage? Do I have insurance protection if I lost my job tomorrow? Just having buffers in place and buying within your means, there's no reason why you can't plan for the future.
Yeah, great.
That's awesome. And I just would like to step in here as well, because we do always calculate repayments with about a 3% buffer.
Yep.
At the moment. So it is some conversation, and it's a really good planning tool as well, I find, with my clients in particular, to look at a 10-year plan. What does 10 years look like? Not like just 12 months. And I believe that's how you've pretty much set yourself up as well.
Absolutely. I always think 30 years down the path, and I always set myself up that if everything, went down, if everything went to poo, would I be okay? And you just have to ask yourself that. And it's all about scenario planning.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Claudia, your journey certainly doesn't stop with this first property. I understand that you used the first homeowners grant to get into that property. What did that mean, and then what happened next?
Yep, so with the grant, it was more just the 5% deposit scheme. So I didn't actually get any money. But what happens is there was at the time 10,000 places Australia-wide. And how it works is that if you can save 5% of your deposit, basically the government will be your guarantor for the remaining 15%. So you basically don't have to pay lender's mortgage insurance because technically you own 20% property.
Okay. So Sally, that 5% versus the 15%, what does that mean?
Well, it's actually huge at the moment, and it again, what the government this year has actually released 35,000 places, because the last 2 years they've done 10,000, which have actually run out after about 3 or 4 months. Give you an idea that saving 20% as opposed to 5% is a huge difference, especially to get into the market earlier. So what the government has done is, in effect, save you sometimes up to about $20,000 or $30,000 in lender's mortgage insurance by offering this scheme. And the banks have also come on board because they're actually giving you pricing that would be equivalent if you have saved 20%, because the banks are actually now pricing on LVRs, which is loan to value ratios.
Okay, so the banks are pricing out LVRs. The government's underwriting, in Claudia's example, 15% of that deposit. meaning she's got to come up with 5. But from the bank's point of view, it's deemed to be 20.
From pricing point of view, yes,
okay.
That's correct.
And 20% is that magic number for lenders' mortgage insurance requirements.
That's right, to avoid that lenders' mortgage insurance.
Right. So this first homeowners program is one that's worth following if you're a first homeowner.
Definitely.
And you meet the criteria. And that criteria is changing, I understand, a lot. So it's worth looking into when you're ready.
Yes, definitely. Because the other thing it does is the stamp duty, which is a big bonus. Up to $650,000, there is no stamp duty, so that saves you, I believe, around $20,000 there, as opposed to being a first homeowner. And then we've got a new scheme coming into place in January that we can touch on a little bit later.
So you've studied the rules, you got the first homeowners grant, and then take me through what happened after that.
So what happened after that, I told my mother I was moving out and she was very upset. So we moved into the property and we lived there for 6 months because that's the criteria you have to do when you take up the 5% deposit scheme with the government. We lived there for 6 months, and because my property went up so quickly, I very quickly had 20% equity in that property and I was eligible to move out and rent it out. So financially, if I rented my property out and rented somewhere else, or I lived in the property that I owned, it really did make no difference from a financial perspective. So I rented my property out and I decided to get a 2-bedroom apartment in Kelko and live in a beautiful apartment on the beach instead. Okay,
so you've rented the lovely 2-bedder on the beach, and you've now taken the step up from your smaller 1-bedder apartment into the 2-bedder. What comes next, and how did you decide that you want to get back in again?
So I think rent vesting came up a lot in my studies, and basically it was about buying where you can afford and renting where you want to live. And I was big on the lifestyle drivers. I know sometimes buying, people living there for all their 20s, I didn't have to do that. I knew that I could just rent it out, live somewhere where I'm more comfortable and financially it wouldn't affect me. So the next step was I found myself being contacted by friends and family asking, how did you do that? Can you help me? And I would spend weekends going out to properties and viewing them for them and helping them understand, what's selling for what and how to put an offer in, how to read through a strata report. And that's when I realized, wow, I love this industry and I'm so passionate about it. How can I do this for a living?
And then what happens?
So then I looked up, how can you do this for a living? And this thing called a buyer's agent popped up, and I had never heard of a buyer's agent. And I read about being a buyer's agent, and basically it does all the things that I love and you get paid for it. And I thought, you know what, this is amazing. I would love to help people for a living get in the property market. So went for a job interview and got my first job working for a company based on the Northern Beaches.
So you're at the ripe old age of what, 22, 23?
23 by now.
And you decide you're a buyer's agent. Was it a matter of just walking in saying I'm a buyer's agent, or what did that mean on your journey? Did you have to go and educate?
Definitely. So I had to educate. So I had to get my certificate of registration to work in the industry. I also used my business degree a lot. Purchasing my own property was very helpful. It means I can relate to my clients. I had a lot of first home buyer clients, and they were going through things that I had just been through. So all of that real life experience comes into play about being a buyer's agent. You can have all the degrees in the world, but if you're not out there doing it every day, well, then it's really hard. It's a really hard industry. So naturally, I just got into it, running briefs. I recently just finished my real estate license, so I'm fully qualified. So continuing my professional development has been super important.
Fantastic. And I understand you've actually got back in the market yet again.
I have. So my first apartment did really well. So the moment I could, I got it refinanced with the bank. So probably about a year and a half, 2 years later, and I had made quite a bit of money on that. And what I did is I actually pulled the equity out of my first property to use that for my next deposit and stamp duty for my next property. And by doing that, I was able to buy my second property up in Brisbane.
So, and I'll defer to Sally in a second, but you were able to use the money in your property that you built up to buy another property, and that was the equity you needed on that property. So, Sally, how does that work?
Well, it's also very smart because this is another way we can increase serviceability. At the moment, serviceability is the main thing that's been affected with the interest rate rises. So by having additional income, and it's also tax effective as well. So the banks in their calculation actually use negative gearing. So it's a very smart strategy, rent investing, to actually be able to increase your borrowing capacity and actually then help build your property portfolio.
So Claudia, what you're saying is Claudia, because she was renting the principal place of residence or her small apartment, that income that was deriving went into her servicing on the next purchase.
Correct. And she's got now she's actually in effect got 3 forms of income because she's now got 2 rental properties as well as her own income. And the 2 rental properties, again, the tax man is helping her as well because it's more tax effective by having the negative gearing, which does affect servicing as well, which actually increases servicing in a number of cases.
Okay. So what we're saying here is there's two ways of running this. First is the capital or the equity, and Claudia was able to use the growth in the equity on her existing property to give her the deposit for the other one without even raising the cash, if you like. The cash is built into the property. And number 2, because we had multiple properties, the income increased her with her borrowing power because that's counted as your income.
Correct.
Oh, that's it. So we've used the leverage, if you like, or the income from the 2 properties that are being rented. What we haven't touched on, I suppose, is the actual income we're earning and how that works. Tell me a little bit about that from the mortgage broker's point of view, the salary versus commission versus business income. How does that work?
Well, Claudia's been very smart because she took the idea to just do PAYG. Banks see things quite simply.
PAYG being?
Pay as you go income, so getting paid salary.
Thank you.
Yeah. As opposed to if Claudia, which a lot of property buyers are just on commission only, she'd have to have been earning that commission for 2 years in most cases. The bank want continuity of commission only, right. And same with self-employed people. So again, if she decided to go out on her own and be self-employed, she'd need to have been in that business for at least 2 years because the banks want to see 2 years of history. Okay,
so with the salary, what's the criteria on that?
Most banks just need 1 pay slip at the moment.
1 pay slip?
Yes.
So literally working for, a week or 2?
Yeah.
Right. And I assume there's a few other criteria, such as if you're on probation or something like that, don't I?
Well, the major banks these days don't see that as a hurdle anymore, which is quite interesting. It's definitely changed in the last couple of years with the change in people's employment.
Okay. That's really interesting. So if I'm going to go out and be an entrepreneur and have a crack, I've got to wait 2 years before the banks even want to talk to me.
Correct.
Wow. There's something that you sort of mentioned along the way that I just want to harp back on a fraction. And we talked about this first homeowners scheme and the way that it helps the likes of Claudia get into the property. And really it's all government-led. The government's trying to get people into that property ladder. What are you seeing on the horizon in terms of this government legislation and where they're going?
Well, definitely this year the government's increased the spots from 10,000 to 35,000 this year, so that's exciting. They've also got a regional grant for people in the regions, but the major change that is coming up in January, where New South Wales government is going to be changing the upfront stamp duty into a yearly tax. So this is going to be a very interesting scenario. At the moment, we are going to be able to buy a property up to only 1.5 million and then do the stamp duty over the life that you actually live in the property. So
up to 1.5 million deferred stamp duty. So essentially stamp duty is amortised into the ownership period of the property. Do we have any more hard, fast rules around this? Like if I go and buy a property now, I know how much stamp duty I'm going to pay, right? It's a fixed percent. What's the deferred stamp duty program look like?
We're not 100% sure, but what we are 100% sure is that the banks are going to also see this as a new liability, which has been confirmed in the last couple of weeks. So that's going to, again, affect servicing. So people are going to have the choice whether they pay the stamp duty up front or defer it over, 15 years, for example. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that space, because my belief is today is a really good time to buy up until that 1.5 million, because what generally happens when the government sends out a scheme is the property prices in that price bracket will increase.
So we're seeing the stamp duty being deferred, which is obviously means we don't have to save as much to get in, because traditionally we've got to pay the stamp duty when we buy the property. Okay, so the deferred stamp duty is only available for first homeowners.
Correct.
And it's not stuck on each property.
Correct.
Wow, okay. So it's really another incentive to get in the door quicker.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about this servicing really quickly. So say if I buy a property and I defer the stamp duty and I pick a number, the stamp duty would have been 40 grand, but I've taken the deferral, so we take that over 10 years, it's going to cost me 4 grand a year. Does that 4 grand go into my servicing when they're allowing how much I can borrow?
Well, basically, the banks are working around how they're going to do it. They're sort of seeing it's going to be a bit more like how they do the HEX payments, whether it's going to be called part of DTI, which is debt to income ratio, which is very important at the moment with the banks, because a lot of the banks aren't wanting to see any more than 6 times debt to income ratio. So it is still in the drawing stages right now, so stay tuned to see what most banks will also have a different policy from each other as well. So it'll be interesting.
So watch this space. And when do we see this all hit the ground? 1st of Jan? Or
if people can get into this scheme now if they want to settle on the 16th of January or after. So they have
settling.
So they can actually be eligible now, but they have to be settling after 16th of January. So from the 16th of January, we'll definitely see a lot more.
So the $1 million challenge, if you like, in that is if you go and buy property now, you don't even know how the scheme's going to work and how it's going to affect your borrowing ratio. So it's a pretty
good time, I believe, is now a short window to get into that market.
Before we see the massive rise.
I believe.
Well, you're predicting a bit of a rise, yeah.
Well, I believe property prices are demand and supply. So if we're going to have more demand in that bracket, I believe that it's going to push the prices up.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating discussion from my point of view, ladies, and I really appreciate your time today. Claudia, you're a sort of a breath of fresh air. Your maturity and your adaptability around this property stuff is amazing, and I know I've been doing it for a long time now, and have only do it because I've been involved in property, and I know Sally does a lot in this space. But the amount of knowledge and skills that you got in such a short period of time is pretty amazing. If someone wanted to talk to you, it sounds like your beautiful market is the first homeowners and you're a property buyer. How can they get to you to get some words of wisdom and really pick your brain, if you like?
Absolutely. So you can find me on all social media or on my website. I work for a company called Porter's House Buyers Agent. We're based on the Northern Beaches and Lower North Shore, and you can just look up my name, Claudia Brooks, or Claude Brooks Buyers Agent on Instagram, and you'll find me there. And I have all the tips and tricks to buying property in this market on there.
Oh, fantastic. So that's Claudia Brooks. And
at Porter's House Buyers Agent. Porter's
House Buyers Agent, right. And your personal profile will lead you to there anyway.
Absolutely, and you'll find all my contact details on there.
And am I fair in saying that you love to talk to first homeowners?
Absolutely. Like I said, I've been through the process before, and I'm only 25, so I'm very relatable, and I understand, the costs associated with living in the area we do. It's really challenging, but there's always a way to get in the market, and I'm here to help.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I tell you now, I'll be sending my daughter your way as soon as I can get her to actually start saving some money. So
that would be a good start.
Even that motivation is pretty amazing. And Sally, in terms of how people might get to you to talk about possible ways to buy the first house, in other words, you're the broker, Claudia's the advisor, you're the broker, how do we get to you?
Well, you can go and find me on either Navwealth website, or you can contact me directly at sally@navwealth.com.au.
Fantastic. All right, ladies, thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful talk, and look forward to when we get together again.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today for NavTalk. You can listen to other podcasts in the NavTalk series via YouTube or where you get your favourite podcasts, or simply search NavTalk. Be sure to follow Navwealth on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. And please, if there are any particular topics you would like us to cover for a future episode, let us know via our website. I'm Simon Prowse. Until we talk again.